Many people say that they work with problems. They say that they define problems and they identify the problems, and that that's always the starting point for their intervention. We don't just say, well, we're going to kind of sit and define a problem and say this is the problem that they face. We want to go beyond that, and we want to actually think seriously about why the problem is there and break the problem down so that we can find entry points for real change. Most problems have many, many, many dimensions and can't be addressed with just one solution. We call this deconstructing problems. There are a few techniques that we use. These come from the business management literature, and one is called the 5 whys, and essentially a process of just asking why many, many times. And the other one is called the fishbone diagram. Some people call it Ishikawa diagram, where you take the results from the 5 whys and you basically draw them out so that you can visually look at a problem. I'll give you a couple of examples. A few years ago, we worked with a government that had attempted to introduce an industrial parks program where they were trying to locate businesses in pieces of land and create clusters on those lands of businesses that would then employ people, etc. What they found was that no one came to the industrial parks. You know, they managed to identify the land, they managed to get people to contract for the land, but no businesses came there. 5, 10 years later, the land was still vacant. And they said, well, the problem is that we don't have functioning industrial parks. The solution, let's do them again. He said, well, why don't you hold your horses and let's ask why? What do you mean why? Well, why did the last parks not work? Well, because businesses didn't come there. Why did businesses not come there? Well, because the businesses hadn't heard of the park. Why hadn't heard of the park? Well, because we didn't do good marketing for the park. Why did you not do good marketing for the park? Well, because we didn't actually have a marketing department. Now, do you see how you ask why a few times and you move from saying, well, business didn't come, to something that is actually an issue you can remedy, which is we don't have a marketing department. This is the 5 why technique. The 5 why technique allows you to go deep into the causes of problems so that you can address the root rather than the manifestation of the problem. Now, in this case, we would also be using an Ishikawa diagram, which essentially would say the problem relates to the failure of past parks. That's the problem. That's what we see. That's what people are paying attention to. Why that failed was, well, because no one had any knowledge about the parks. Why? Because we had poor marketing about the parks. Why? Because we don't have a marketing department. Now that's one branch from your 5 whys. Another branch could be, well, they failed because the land was poorly chosen. Perhaps in some cases you find that the land had too much pollution on it, or it was far away from the city. So, well, why was the land poorly chosen? Well, because we didn't really have a team that knew what businesses want. Why didn't you have a team that knew what businesses wanted? Well, we didn't have that because we really have only public officials and no one has any experience being an investor in the private sector. Now that's something you can remedy. That's something small that you can try to deal with. Much smaller and much more manageable than the bigger problem. Now the 5 whys allows us to identify multiple branches and sub-branches, and when we do that, we go from big problems that are very hard to deal with to smaller problems that we can actually pick off one by one and make progress with. That's called deconstructing problems, and those are 2 very, very simple processes and tools we use to do it. You might want to try them.